Riders up. They say it's the greatest 2 minutes in sport. Running for roses, black-eyed Susans and carnations. Before you get your flowers, then it comes down to the test of the champion. You only get one shot. There are no second chances. 3 races, 5 weeks, no time to rest. No time to hesitate. It's all or nothing. The most coveted title in American horse racing. Calm. Then a cacophony of cheers. The thunder of hooves. The roars of adoring crowds. The Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, the Belmont Stakes. Together, they are the triple crown of American horse racing. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast.
Afternoon, Ben.
Afternoon, Jack.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks, mate. I'm having a very restful weekend. How are you?
I'm in London because we're down for the marathon. My wife is running the marathon,
Yeah.
and couldn't be more excited by that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you are actually attending a major sporting event this weekend.
I'm attending a genuine major sporting event, which I did mention just right at the end last week. Probably should have given it more attention, really. But I think it's the kind of thing I can see us doing a full episode on in the future, shall we say?
Yeah, definitely. It was
Plenty of history behind it. It is. I went last year as well. It is actually genuinely, if anyone can get into London for it or is around London, it is a genuinely interesting and fun thing to watch. Obviously, we've got the elite runners first. Obviously, you've got all the people dressed up, rhinos. You've got people dressed as fridges last year. Romesh Ranganathan was running it last year and was getting a lot of attention. It's just a nice place to be. Would recommend.
It's an all-day event, isn't it? It's basically a day out. Pro race.
It's definitely a day out. Yeah.
Yeah, pro racing in the morning. Men's, women's, disability races, and then all the amateurs for the entire day, which is nice. People lining the streets, a few drinks if the weather's good. Yeah. I think I'll be heading to the Cutty Sark, so looking forward to it. Oh, that'd be a good location to watch it. That'd be very
Indeed.
fun. I've got a friend whose daughter is doing St John's Ambulance, and she's going to be at mile 22, so I suspect she will be busy.
Yes, I suspect so. But yeah, it's good of her.
Yeah, exactly. Where should we start? Last week's events?
Yeah, last week's events. Obviously, we'll start with the main event. We've had first few rounds of the NFL draft. Cam Ward going first overall to the Tennessee Titans, as expected. Travis Hunter going second pick, as expected, but not to the Browns, as expected. The Jaguars traded up for him, so two-way player Travis Hunter will be at the Jacksonville Jaguars next season. So lucky for us Brits, because I believe they're coming to Wembley. The major shock of the draft so far is Shadil Sanders dropping way down, so we'll see how that resolves itself. I have opinions about that. Maybe that's best for another episode.
I did see that. That's the big shock, isn't it?
Anyway, snooker as well.
Yeah.
Big news there.
Lots of updates in the
Rocket.
snooker. Yeah, the Rocket. The Rocket's through. Beat Ali Carter.
Good. Comfortably in the end. Or fairly comfortably in the end. 4-time
winner Mark Selby is out. He lost
bit of a shock.
Lost to Ben Williston. And obviously we've previously mentioned that reigning champ Kyron Wilson is gone. Less of a shock. Almost a certainty.
Open.
Yeah, well, some really good last 16 ties are underway, actually, involving Mark Higgins. Not Mark Higgins, John Higgins and Mark Williams. They're not playing each other, but they're in a bit of a ding-dong, both of them. And the pick of the last 16 rounds is probably Judd Trump versus Sean Murphy, both former champs.
Yeah.
And the other bit of interesting news was Mark Allen hit a 147, which obviously we discussed in our snooker episode is very rare.
And very lucrative for him.
Very lucrative for him, along with the qualifier, pocketing himself quite a lot of money, £147,000 in fact. Unless he gets a share of it, I don't know, I need to check that. It might now be divided.
Either way.
But still, yeah, it's a handsome payout. But he's also out. So
oh, okay. So just a little bit of a payout.
Yeah, it's a sweetener for Mark Allen as he went out. He actually
consolation prize.
Yeah, he hit his 147 when he was like 9-3 down or something. So pressure off, and why not?
The rest of the weekend sporting news, we are recording too early to come across. We've got Liverpool potentially wrapping up the title tomorrow, and the Arsenal ladies taking on Lyon in Lyon, a goal down. So see how that resolves itself. And of course, the Red Roses and France Grand Slam decider in the Women's Six Nations tomorrow. Yeah. So fingers crossed for all our respective teams there.
Absolutely. Do you want me to just summarise what we've got coming up on this bank holiday weekend that is approaching? I'm going to whistle stop it because there is a lot. So we've got the Beach Soccer World Cup, which has started and is ongoing. That's coming up. Well,
we nearly did an episode on that. Yeah, maybe next year or next time.
Exactly, we flared with that one, but we decided to go in a different direction. The Women's Vuelta in cycling starts, which is cool.
Nice.
Men's Champions League semi-finals in midweek, which is obviously Arsenal, PSG, and Barcelona versus Inter Milan, or Internazionale, I think as they prefer to be called.
Nervous?
Very. So stop talking to me about it. I'm trying to stay calm and not think about it. Premier League, as you've already mentioned, will be wrapped up in terms of relegation and title race by then, in all probability. But the top four is very fun, so that carries on. IPL continues. Gujarat, Delhi, and RCB are all setting the pace at the halfway point or near halfway point. We have the Miami Grand Prix next weekend, and
there's a lot, isn't there?
Mate, it gets worse. The Champions Cup semi-finals in men's rugby union. Northampton Saints versus Leinster and Bordeaux versus Toulouse. The European Challenge Cup semi-finals in men's rugby union. Lyon versus Racing 92 and Edinburgh versus Bath. The Super Rugby season has kicked off and is approaching its halfway point with the Chiefs and the Crusaders leading the way. And you have the Super League season, also near enough at the halfway point in terms of regular domestic season games. Hull KR and Wigan setting the pace there. And you have the Diamond League in athletics in China, in Shanghai. So bank holiday weekend, just tuck in, basically. Tuck in. And that's without even mentioning our main event.
Yeah, I think we can safely say there's something for everyone this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a sports lover.
Including fans of horse racing, of course.
Yeah.
What do we have this weekend, Ben?
We have the first race of the American Triple Crown of horse racing from the Kentucky Derby.
Kentucky Derby.
We're going to do this all episode. You're going to call it the Derby because that's what the Yanks call it, and I'm going to call it the Derby because it's named after the Epsom Derby.
This is true. It is. It's a bit like last week, me referring to football and soccer. You've got to respect the hosts of the particular event, and that's all I'm doing, Ben. But you go about it whichever way you want.
No, you're right. You are right. I just will slip into calling it the Derby constantly because out of habit.
I'm also potentially going to go to Tennessee later in the Kentucky, later in the year, and Tennessee and a few other places. So I feel like I have to be respectful for my future hosts, and they will be making my food. So. Best to start now.
They will be making my food. I love that. Yes, okay. Well, Kentucky Derby then. Derby. I will try and get into the habit. But should we start with what the Triple Crown itself is? Because it's quite niche, actually, if you're not familiar with horse racing and particularly not familiar with American horse racing.
Yeah, so, these are the three events that American horse racing revolves around, essentially. They're all Grade 1 listed races. Can you tell us anything about what Grade 1 listed means, Ben?
Yeah, I can. You know, I love a tangent into the technicalities. The highest class of race in an American horse racing, basically. It's difficult to summarize the classification process. It's quite complex. There's various criteria. But the grade level is ultimately really assigned by looking at data that indicates the quality of the field for the last 5 years. And basically, in order to, I think in simple terms, in order to achieve or maintain Grade 1 status, it's necessary to attract a competitive field for a number of years. Obviously, they look at the data over the last 5, but the longer you're doing it, obviously, the more likely you are to fulfill that criteria. They also have some very strict anti-doping requirements, which we might flirt with in this episode.
It'll get mentioned.
Yeah, it'll become pretty self-explanatory. But you have to meet some anti-doping regulations essentially in order to be Grade 1. And the decision is taken by the American Grade Stakes Committee of the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, which is an absolute mouthful.
That is a mouthful.
But many Grade 1 races are weight for age. So that's weights adjusted only according to age and sex, obviously male or female horses. And there are also some set weights where all the horses are required to carry the same weight. Usually applicable when all the horses are of the same age and sex, which will become, pretty relevant. To our events that we're discussing today, because they are all 3-year-olds across all 3 of the Triple Crown races, and the Grade 1 races must have a purse of at least $300,000. But not all races with such a high purse are Grade 1, if that makes sense. So if you have a purse of over $300,000, you can be Grade 1, but just because you do doesn't make you a Grade 1. I think there are some other races that are more lucrative, but
I feel there's probably more races on the borderline than the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, or the Belmont Stakes, which are the 3 Triple Crown events.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like these are comfortably Grade 1 events, and that is not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's probably something to do with their longevity, their cultural significance, etc., etc.
Yeah. Like in the UK, horse racing is obviously in the UK goes back in organised terms to the 18th century. Obviously, America's a much newer country, but these are still old races. The Belmont Stakes is actually the oldest. It's the third of the 3 to be run of the Triple Crown events each year. It was first run in 1867,
which is mad.
Which is very old. The Preakness Stakes following it in 1873, and then 2 years later in 1875, the first ever Kentucky Derby, which is, I would say, it feels to me the most famous and the most prestigious. But of course, winning the Triple Crown is the greatest thing you can do, so they are nothing without each other.
Yeah.
In this case,
I'd agree with that, though. It's weird because it's the newest, but it's certainly internationally the most reputable. If you said Kentucky Derby, I think most armchair sports fans would know what it was.
Well, I've heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily say the same is true of the Belmont or the Preakness.
No, I wouldn't say so. And it's certainly, it's only really this year that even before we even started this podcast, I just happened to have been reading a book, or listening to a book, because I don't read, I only listen, listening to a book on this, which is Great Horse Racing Mysteries, which I can recommend, by John McAvoy. So that sort of turned me on to the subject matter, and obviously it was only really then I really appreciated the Preakness Stakes and the Belmont Stakes. I'd heard of them, but didn't appreciate how big they were and how much history goes behind it. So it's a very fascinating event, a very fascinating history. And boy, is there a lot of scandal and a lot of controversy in the past of it as well, which we will get into.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange event, like how it came about as well, because like you say, the order in which the races emerged historically, and then now the order in which they are run, and the reputation that precedes each of the respective races. But I think it came about because basically Thoroughbred owners began sending their successful Kentucky Derby race winners to compete in the others. In the Preakness, that is, and in the Belmont. And then because they were doing that, there was just a consistency about it, and it slowly turned into what is known as the Triple Crown.
Yeah, but I like that. I like it when things develop naturally and develop in a sporting manner like that. People realise naturally over time it is hard to win all 3 races, and it didn't happen until 1919 was the first time it happened.
Yeah,
Sir Barton, the first horse to win all 3 races. But even then, it was 1930 before the phrase Triple Crown was really utilised as a phrase. When Gallant Fox became the second horse to win all 3 after Sir Barton, and sports writer Charles Hatton brought the phrase into American usage there. So the races were going on for 60 years before. They were sort of linked together. So I like that it's happened naturally, and I like that it is, again, we said this previously about sports, it is so rare that you get a Triple Crown winner that it makes it special. Indeed, we went 37 years until recently without one. So yeah.
No, it's cool.
I think it's cool.
It is very cool, and It's funny how these things sort of gather pace, isn't it? Because you mentioned our sports writing friend Charles Hatton, as if we know each other. But like I think that was sort of like a first example, not a first example, but one of the first examples of like media hype and public interest really playing a role in the emergence of like what is now a well-known series of races. Because I think there was basically a lot of speculation and media hype around the possibility of a super horse that could win all three races, having in the weeks leading up to the Derby. Because I don't think they'd necessarily run in the same order back then either, but it probably got coined because of that, because of people championing, and hyping up a particular horse.
And then it happened.
And then it happened, exactly.
Yeah, which is great. And then that captures public interest for years to come. And obviously, we've said before about how, well, we mentioned with the NFL last week, sports growing in the 1920s, 1930s. Baseball obviously took off there, with the New York Yankees particularly being the first sort of super team in American sport. It was because everyone had, at that point, a lot of people had radios in their house, and that is instantaneous news. Instead of having to pick it up the next day via newspapers, being able to listen to sportscasts coming through, live updates of a game going on hundreds, thousands of miles away. And this kind of jumped on that particular bandwagon.
Yeah,
and
it's cool.
Came at an opportune time, obviously 1930. Gallant Fox doing it, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
I mean, to say how these races were considered separate to one another prior to this, they were also the Preakness was ran on the same day as the Derby on a couple of occasions. So there weren't the Derby, sorry. So 1917, 1922, there was no way you could have a Triple Crown winner
that year. Yeah, exactly. Those 2 years, rather.
Those 2 years.
I think it was. Yeah, was it before 31? It was 11 times the Preakness was run before the Derby, and it was from basically after Gallant Fox won it. That's when they decided to like formalise the process and put it in the order in which it is now run, I think. Yeah,
on the back of the public interest, essentially, I can imagine. So, yeah. Cool.
There was no trophy for it either until the 1950s. I think, in fact, 1950. That's when the trophy was commissioned. It was retrospectively awarded to the winners that had achieved the feat.
Posthumously, I imagine, for the horses.
Yeah. But there's been a trophy ever since 1950. Not that many people have won it, because only 13 horses have ever won the Triple Crown. Most recently, Justify in 2018. And I really like the name of this horse, American Pharaoh.
It's a good name.
In 2015. But as you said, there hadn't been a Triple Crown winner between 2015 and 1978, which is the longest gap ever in the history of the Triple Crown, 37 years.
Yeah.
The 1970s were actually a very fruitful decade for Triple Crown winners. And they were kicked off by the legendary Secretariat in 1973.
Yeah.
Who will almost certainly come up again because I don't think a horse has ever been more dominant, probably.
No, I think... No, by any measure, by the lengthy one by the statistical analysis that goes into horses, incredible horse. Incredible, yeah. And we say that coming off the 1970s where you had Secretariat and then two more winners in the 1970s. 37 years without a Triple Crown winner, it doesn't remove from the mystique of it. It adds the mystique. And then when American Pharaoh finally did it, it's global news when that happens. It's good. It shows how history builds onto individual events, which is essentially what we're trying to do sort of with this podcast, give you the context for it, and then it makes when it happens seem all the more special.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it's supposed to be hard, right? Like that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and it's incredibly hard. But
you only get one shot at it.
Only get one shot, like, because it's only 3-year-olds, so basically every horse only gets one attempt at it in its career, and the races are over 5 weeks. And I'm not a horse racing expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that it's rare that you run a horse that regularly.
Yeah, and they're sprints essentially. I mean, the closest you can get to sprints in horse racing, they're over just 2-minute races. Of course, the Kentucky Derby called the what was it, the
greatest 2 minutes in sport.
The greatest 2 minutes in sport. There we go. Yeah,
I think it's the greatest.
So,
I'll double check that.
it's a fair description either way.
But yeah, you can get injuries. Obviously, the horse might not be ready to run in the first race, which would completely scupper you. But it could be ready to run in the Belmont, for example. There's a lot of variables which would mean the horse doesn't run in all three over such a short window. There's a lot of travelling as well, because these racecourses, America's a big place, and whilst these racecourses might appear on a map to look as though they are near to one another, they are not that close to one another.
America is a very big country. I can tell you that from personal experience.
Yeah, and to illustrate just how difficult it is, no filly or gelding has ever won the Triple Crown. Only colts. And if you want to know what that means, the Triple Crown.
I do.
So the Triple Crown is 3-year-old thoroughbreds, and a thoroughbred is a breed. I had to look this up, everybody. I'm not this good at horses. Thoroughbreds are effectively considered like hot-blooded horses that are known for their agility, speed, and spirit. They're basically the athletes of the horse racing world and the sprinters. And a colt is defined as an uncastrated male from the age of 2 up to and including the age of 4, but obviously in this instance would all be 3-year-olds. A gelding is a colt, but castrated. And a filly,
which is, I should point out, that is usually done to control a very fiery animal.
Yeah, boisterous.
Yes, to calm down a boisterous animal. But the trade-off of that is in these sort of short sprint events, if you lose a bit of that fire, does it act as a disadvantage? So geldings have won individual events within the Triple Crown, but as Ben mentioned, they've never won all three.
Exactly.
Only colts.
And a filly is a female horse under the age of 4.
Yes.
And fillies, like geldings, have won individual events in the Triple Crown, but have never won the Triple Crown.
Yes.
It's really, actually, the history behind how thoroughbreds came to be in America is kind of fun. I think the first thoroughbred horse that they believe to have entered the American colonies, as it was back then, was Buell Rock. He was imported in 1730 from England to America by a merchant mariner named James Patton. At the age of 21, and Mr. James Patton. Yeah, here we go, man. Here we go. We're going 5 for 5. He was distantly related to U.S. General George S. Patton. So there you go. I think that's probably as close. That's as close as I'm going to get to World War II in this episode.
I'm not going into it. So we did it though.
We managed to squeeze it in somehow. But yeah, Buell Rock was a racehorse himself, and although a reasonably average one, he predominantly ran at York, which is where you're from, in the 18th century.
There you go.
Which is kind of fun. But he was followed to America by Messenger in 1788. Messenger didn't have a long racing career himself. He was a common ancestor, but the reason he's famous is he's a common ancestor of many successful racehorses that came to be in the 20th century. Mainly from standardbreds rather than thoroughbreds, though. But yeah, like horse racing as essentially can be sort of traced back to a handful of horses. I think one of the most famous ones is Diomed, who is named after the ancient Greek heroes Diomedes, which is kind of fun.
Cool.
Another great horse or great noble horse racing lineage moved to America in the late 18th century. It's considered one of the best colts ever seen in Britain in the 18th century and won the inaugural Epsom Derby. So
we can say Derby there.
Yeah. He basically became a stud and has had a significant impact on American racing. I think it started with his son, Sir Archie. John F. Wall, a racing historian, said that Sir Archie was the first outstanding stallion that they can claim as a Native American thoroughbred. And he was actually retired from the racetrack because of a lack of opponents. That's how good he was.
I mean, the history of breeding in thoroughbreds is I mean, you have to be a bit of a nerd, but pretty fascinating to begin with. And you can trace ancestry back as you can with most pedigrees in animals for an awful long way, and to common ancestors as well. Same as in British thoroughbred racing, where you can trace it back essentially to 3 horses in the 17th century, I believe, which I imagine these will trace back to too, because being thoroughbreds, they're probably related to the same common ancestors. But yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, genealogists throwing you a bone.
Yeah,
It is very interesting.
Well, it's also relevant because, we've just lifted off like 3 or 4 horses there that came over from England, but it's basically after the American Revolution, the centre of thoroughbred breeding, and therefore by extension racing in the United States, just moved west. Because it was obviously east in the first instance, because for obvious reasons. It's just slowly moved west, and
that's where the land is. That's where the space is.
Yeah,
and good conditions to raise horses.
And as you'll probably find out on your upcoming holiday, Kentucky and Tennessee just basically became the epicenter of American horse breeding and racing.
This is giving me a lot of context for my upcoming holiday. I'm actually quite excited by it. My wife's going to get annoyed with me saying, what breed do you reckon that horse is? Do you reckon that's a thoroughbred?
Well, they're massive and muscular, so
I'm sure I'll spot them.
But obviously, and that's how you come full circle to effectively the Kentucky Derby, is because that became the very centre of American horse racing after those particular horses were brought over. Yeah,
so
fun little tangent.
It's very interesting. Should we start off with the Kentucky Derby then? Bit of information behind the jewel in the crown of the 3 races, as far as we're concerned, anyway.
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, it seems a sensible place to start chronologically, and given that it's coming
also
up.
this coming weekend, so yes, it makes sense. So yeah, as Ben mentioned, it's a Grade 1 stakes race run at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, which I think I'm excited about. It's 20 horses, and they're all 3-year-olds, as mentioned. Which obviously means you can't win it twice. It's only for 3-year-olds. So in your 3-year-old seasons, that means if you're free on January the 1st, I believe. So some of them may technically be 4 years old, but it's their 3-year-old season. And it's run over a distance of 1¼ miles or 10 furlongs, about 2,000 metres.
Yeah.
So Colton geldings carry 126 pounds and fillies 121 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's a set weight they carry.
Yeah, 57 kilos and 55 kilos if you prefer the metric system.
Throw a bone to our Canadian listeners there. Some kilograms for you. I think Canada's actually the same in the UK. We just make it up as we go along. Pounds, stones, kilograms.
Yeah, miles.
We know it all. Yeah, miles, furlongs apparently.
I think we said earlier, didn't we? Race was first run in 1875.
Yeah.
Unlike the others, older races, the Triple Crown, rather, it's been run every year since its inception. It was twice rescheduled within the same year, though. First time during World War II, 1945, normally a good excuse.
Yeah.
Second time due to, as is becoming a reoccurring theme with these
we should just say, for the usual reasons, yes.
Yeah.
World War II, COVID-19.
Yeah.
Rearranged, but not cancelled.
Yeah, exactly. Not cancelled, so it's gone every year. The Derby and the Oaks. The Oaks is the Derby, rather, a sister race. They're the oldest major sporting events in the US that have been held annually since their beginning.
Nice.
Which is I think that's a pretty cool stat, actually.
That is a cool stat, yeah.
And among Thoroughbred Stakes races, they are the oldest that have been held annually on the same track every year, because we won't go into all the nuances of it, but basically the Belmont and the Preakness have changed venue a few times.
Nice.
Yeah, which is kind of fun.
It's the most watched and most attended horse race in the United States, unsurprisingly, and it will be the 151st running, we hope, because we got that wrong before, on Saturday, 3rd of May, 2025.
Yeah.
This coming Saturday.
So a lot of history, steeped in history, and it came about after Colonel Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr., grandson of...
Which is an incredibly famous name in American history. I mean, obviously I know this is the grandson of, but Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. is just that's an amalgamation of a couple of very famous people in American history.
Oh.
Lewis and Clark, specifically.
Nice. Who are they?
William Clark and Meriwether Lewis. I genuinely didn't know that. I didn't know the Lewis and Clark connection. So Lewis and Clark were two explorers, start of the 19th century, as America was expanding. I think whoever the president was then, I want to say Thomas Jefferson, basically chartered them to explore the Missouri River and try and find the continental divide. So they basically traveled down the Missouri River with their crew. I don't want to say crew, with their team on the expedition, and discovered a whole load of America that had been very minimally explored by Western people before, and in doing so, obviously met a lot of the native population along the way. And
Man, it's mad that you even knew that.
I read a book on it.
Okay. Well,
It comes as no surprise to you, yeah.
Yeah, I should have known.
It's a very interesting story. I would recommend anyone into their pure history delving into it. There's a very good book on it, which again I should have got information about. This is the book I...
Yeah, but I blindsided you with the reference, mate, so...
You did.
You can't be criticised for not being prepared.
Well, you didn't
for
blindside me. You sent me the notes in advance.
Well, nonetheless, I didn't expect you to necessarily have to hand your references for Missouri River expeditions.
Indeed.
William Clark, so his grandson, this man who is named after an amalgamation of very famous Americans. Well, his grandson, he basically travelled to England in 1872 and he visited Epsom in Surrey, where the Derby had been running annually since 1780, as I think we previously mentioned on our national podcast episode.
Indeed.
From there, he went over to Paris in France. He met a group of racing enthusiasts who had formed the French Jockey Club in 1863. They had organised a Grand Prix de Paris at Longchamp, which is also a very famous horse race. Greatest race in France, in fact, I think it is coined as. And when he returned home to Kentucky, inspired by his European adventure, he organised the Louisville Jockey Club to raise money for building quality racing facilities just outside the city. And he was successful in raising that money, built a track which would soon become known as the Churchill Downs, which was named after John and Henry Churchill, who provided the land for the racetrack.
Fair enough.
Yeah, well, that's the way these things go, isn't it, historically? And the naming went official in 1937. So yeah. But yeah, that's pretty cool though, pretty cool link. I mean, the historical links are everywhere, though. I mean, like the Kentucky Derby at its inception was 1.5 miles, so the same distance as the Epsom Derby, which makes sense because it was inspired by or based upon. But it changed lengths in 1896 to its current distance of 1.25 miles. I'm not really sure the reasons for that, but it doesn't really matter. We're talking the difference between 1/4 mile. It's a sprint.
Yeah. I've got a second World War II reference actually to slip in here.
Go on.
And a reference to our personal favourite television series, probably ever, but certainly about the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
The book was called Undaunted Courage by Stephen E. Ambrose. And Stephen E. Ambrose also wrote the book Band of Brothers, of which the TV series is based.
Oh, that is very cool. That is that's a nice little segue.
I think that's probably why I read it, because I probably bounced off Band of Brothers straight onto it by him. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting story, interesting book. We digress.
We do digress. Yeah. We like to digress, though. That's all part and parcel of it. Sorry, where did I get to? I was just giving a little bit of history, wasn't I? So May 17th, 1875 was the first Kentucky Derby. Ran in front of an estimated crowd of 10,000 people. I presume estimated because people probably weren't doing the turnstiles the way they do in this day and age.
Often the case.
Yeah. A field of 15 3-year-old horses contested it, and a colt named Aristides won the inaugural derby, as I should remind myself to say. And he...
Sounds like another Greek name, that.
Yeah, like, there's a theme there, isn't there? He later also came second in the Belmont Stakes, but obviously didn't win the Triple Crown didn't exist back then.
Wouldn't surprise me if the horse Aristides, sounding like Greek origin, probably was related to Diomed. I would bet on that. That would be mentioned previously.
That would be cool, but I haven't done the family tree.
Yeah, see if I sound smart after this.
It's rare that you don't. And it's been on the radio since 1925. It's been on TV since 1949, and it's been on national TV. It's been on national TV since 1952. So nice. It's pretty big deal. So big a deal, in fact, that the purse for the Derby is $5 million.
Solid.
Which is, a decent amount of cash, but not as much as is bet on it. And this is, I think, is absolutely insane. $210 million, which what does that work out at? Probably about
170 million pounds, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
Is bet on it, or was bet on it in last year, or its highest, maybe its highest.
Probably go up this year.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like, it's a 2-minute race.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely wild. But people like it, and they're prepared to bet on it. And like the Grand National, it's an institution, it's cultural, so of course they do. I mean, it's probably exactly the same philosophy as is over here, which is, doesn't really matter if you like horse racing. You watch the Derby and you throw a couple of quid on it.
Yeah. I mean, as we mentioned in our episode on the National, there's people who don't probably even notice the horse racing exists the rest of the year, who will tune in every year as a family, even perhaps to watch the National and maybe even put a bet on it. So, yeah, traditions.
Yeah. Records? Interested in any?
Always.
So the course record, I think this is... If we earlier on we touched on Secretariat and we said that we were going to come back to him, and the reason we're going to come back to him is, as we said, he is just a ridiculous horse, and I think there is no statistic or record that better sums up how damn fast this horse was.
Yeah.
So the course record at the Kentucky Derby is held by Secretariat, the great Secretariat.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah, who in 1973 posted a time of 1 minute 59.4. He's like one of 3 horses to run sub 2 minutes. Secretariat in 1973, Monarchos in 2001, and then this is so like I don't know. I like this stat, but it also breaks my heart a little bit. And Sham, who finished second to Secretariat in 73, also ran sub 2 minutes. So basically would have won.
Yeah, 1973 is probably the greatest. I mean, it is almost certainly the greatest event in history. It's, you can obviously still see the footage of it. It's very, very fun.
Yeah, and
it's incredible. Two incredible horses, clearly.
And you'd think that me just talking about the sub 2 minute finish is what I was talking about in terms of the statistic that's remarkable and illustrates Secretariat's dominance, and it isn't. The thing that's absolutely insane is that Secretariat did something that's unique and frankly crazy, not just in like horse racing terms, not just in terms of Triple Crown races, but like in terms of any kind of athletic performance. So Secretariat ran each successive quarter of the race faster than the last. So basically the horse ran negative splits. It got faster as the race went on, which anyone who knows anything about running just doesn't happen.
That's incredible.
To try and illustrate this point, if you're watching the 100 meters and you see someone pulling away at the end of the 100 meters, you could be forgiven for thinking that that person is accelerating away from the rest of the field. And in actual fact, what is happening is they are decelerating slower. So everybody else is slowing down quicker than the winner, so then the winner pulls away. And so running negative splits over like that distance in a sprint is just stupid.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and
what a horse.
And in terms of like, if you were to try and translate it into a race, because using the 100 meters there to illustrate that performance, it's probably a bad one because the 100 meters are so short. It's kind of like running negative splits in the 800 meters, like just getting faster and faster as the 800 meters goes on.
Yeah,
which is like no one does, right? Maybe people run the last 200 meters faster because they've saved a bit for a kick, but it's like speeding up in the 800 meters until the finish. And the 800 meters is a barbaric event, so
yeah,
people don't run negative splits.
Probably a better comparison, really.
Yeah, it's just, anyway, I just love that stat. I just think it is really, really cool. And I've noticed, or I've realised this about me, Jack, which I don't think I really appreciated before we started this podcast. I love horse racing because I love the horses. Like, these statistics about the horses are just like, I don't know, it's so pure because the horse doesn't know what it's doing. It's just it's running for the love of the game. It's obviously trained to within an inch of its life, and that's fine. Like, of course it is, because it's an elite level animal and athlete. It just isn't aware of that. But I just love the fact that they do these insane, remarkable things, and they're not doing it for the accolades, the money, or anything like that. They're just doing it because the horse loves running. So, like, when you see...
No, I mean, it'd be hard to accuse a horse of having an ego.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh man, I think it's really romantic. I think it's really...
It is, yeah. And I do understand why people love horses so much and the sport of horse racing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know we've delved into the sort of the morality of it previously, but at its core, I don't think anyone could deny the beauty of it and like the majesty of like horse racing.
Yeah, certainly of the animals themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the treatment and all that stuff that goes around the edges, like, you know.
And there is plenty of that.
Yeah,
historically, certainly.
And that's up for debate, and good, healthy debate is a positive thing because it enacts change, as we've said. But like, Jesus, man, like I love the horses. I think they're so cool. Anyway, I've gone very deep there. I guess to get us back on track, I should just tell you that the longest odds to ever win the Derby are 91-1.
Well recovered.
Yeah, 1913 by, I think it's pronounced Doan Rail, but it could be getting that wrong.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and the second highest odds occurred in 2022 when Rich Strike, who if anyone hasn't seen, Google, YouTube it, it's very fun. He went off at 80-1 and won the race.
Yeah, that's an incredible one.
Yeah. It's got a load of traditions as well, like a lot of American sports, like we touched on with the Masters, for example.
A lot of food and drink related traditions.
Yeah, it's weird,
which are some of the best traditions, if you ask me.
Yeah. Do you want to cover any of them? Any particular favourites or ones that you want to mention?
Well, I didn't actually know this until we started sort of doing this research, but the mint julep is a tradition associated with the event, which is an iced drink consisting of bourbon, mint, and sugar syrup. The traditional beverage of the race, and I've actually had a mint julep before, and they are very tasty.
I was going to say, that sounds nice. Yeah, it sounds good.
It's just very refreshing.
Nice.
It is obviously quite a warm place, Kentucky, even in May. So I think a refreshing drink like that over some ice, very nice indeed. Can see why it's popular. On a probably slightly less appropriate for hot weather, a burgoo, which is a fixed stew of beef, chicken, pork, and vegetables, which apparently is a popular Kentucky dish served at the Derby.
Nice.
There you go.
That's a weird juxtaposition, though, in terms of drink to culinary experience.
It's not what I put together. I'm not sure the pairing is one I necessarily go for, but I'm not a culinary expert. So
do you want to wash your stew down with a bourbon,
with a nice mint julep?
Yeah.
There you go. Maybe there's maybe the two things are designed for different parts of the track. Maybe there's some the hoi polloi, maybe like the stew, sat in the infield, which is an area with virtually no view of the race. And then there's the Millionaire's Row, as they call it, where perhaps there's more mint juleps going, which is the seats along the finish line. Different parts of the track, yeah.
Nice. Well, there's a party, isn't there, in the infield? I think there's a bit of a shindig, so to speak, in the.
Is that the infield? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But also,
you can't actually see the race.
No, yeah, well, exactly. It's like sort of probably because of
just busy dancing and eating their stew.
It's not unlike British horse racing that though. There's definitely parts of the
to be fair
race course you can go to where it's just basically people just getting pissed.
Most of Aintree, in my experience.
What else do they like to do traditionally at the Derby? I think they love a song.
They do, yeah. The famous, which we have heard already, the Call to the Post, played on bugle. And they actually have a dedicated chap who attends every event and plays that, called Steve Buttleman. As the horses parade before the grandstands, he plays his Call to the Post on the bugle, which you'd have heard at the beginning of this, and I think anyone who's heard any horse racing jingle probably recognises Call to the Post.
Oh, nice. And then they also play My Old Kentucky Home, I think.
Nice.
A tradition that began in 1921.
The University of Louisville Cardinal Marching Band plays that, yeah. My Old Kentucky Home.
But we love a song over here, don't we, as well? So we can.
We're going to do the FA Cup final very shortly in a couple of weeks, ahead of the two FA Cup finals, men's and women's, and we have our own singing traditions there. So who are we to judge?
Yeah, abide with me.
Not that we're judging at all. We love it.
We do love it. Yeah, we'll talk about abide with me. Obviously, they sing the national anthem. They're in America.
But we do too before the FA Cup final. So
yeah, but the FA Cup final, like,
Oh, okay, so it's okay before the FA Cup. Oh, I see, yeah.
No, I meant that if you're in America, it doesn't
British
matter.
exceptionalism on show here.
Oh, God, man. All I was trying to illustrate is that the Americans love their national anthem and will sing it at any given opportunity. I'm not criticizing.
Whereas half of us hate our national anthem, but sing it anyway.
That's the distinction I was touching upon. Anyway. I sounded perhaps a bit of a dick then. But yeah, all I really meant was America. Of course, they sing the national anthem because it's.
We're 5 episodes in. We're used to you now, Ben.
Yeah, true. Flowers.
Flowers.
Yeah,
it's very like the Masters. This
it is actually
drinks, food, flowers.
Yeah, a lot of similarities.
Traditional traditions.
Although they don't sing the national anthem at the Masters, so I've just disproved my own theory.
I bet they do at some point.
Yeah, that's true.
But as we found out with the Masters, the people who run Augusta National consider themselves above the president anyway, so maybe they consider themselves above the country too.
I was going to say, I think they consider themselves historically above everyone. Although, to their credit, they are evolving.
Slowly.
Yeah, so flowers. A rose blanket is awarded to the Kentucky Derby winner. A lush blanket of 554 red roses.
Precisely 554.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a thing. Started in 1896, but they think it originated from 1883 when a socialite presented ladies at the post-Derby party with roses, and somehow that transitioned into draping the horse in them. So there we are.
Nice. And
there's a traditional command from the paddock judge for the jockeys to mount their horses in advance of the upcoming race. Do you want to recite it? I think it was in the intro.
Bear with me. I was clicking on my other notes. Riders up, I believe, is the traditional command from the paddock judge for jockeys to mount their horses in advance of the upcoming race. See how slick and smooth and professional we are as a duo.
Well, we fly by the seat of our pants. It is... Since 2012, at least, the Grand Marshal recites this, which is another tradition. So we've seamlessly transitioned there. See, we are becoming better at this. The Grand Marshal...
It's been very seamless so far, this.
Yeah. And the Grand Marshal is just a celebrity, for a better phrase.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure we could find out who have been Grand Marshals in the past, if we wanted to. But it's just basically a bit like the first pitch in baseball. You just come out, you say riders up, jockeys get on their horses. Yeah, that's fun. And the whole thing is part of the Kentucky Derby Festival.
Nice.
Yeah, they have like a build-up basically to the race, as you might imagine. It's quite long. I think it lasts about a week. No, sorry. I think I'm just correcting myself. The festivities start in earnest 2 weeks before the Derby. So there's a real build-up considering It's a 2-minute race. And I think this is fun. They have an air show called the Thunder over Louisville, where there's basically an air show and fireworks display, which is good.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. A lot going on at the Derby. I mean, is it worth touching on the stadium?
I think quickly. I mean, it's a big old stadium, 170,000 people. Most significant feature is the oval. It is a dirt track on which the Derby and all the other triple events are all run on dirt as opposed to grass. So anyone watching in the UK will find it very unfamiliar. It will look very different, not being on a lush green, thick, muddy grass. It's on dirt. But that is obviously still very affected by the weather and by the ambient conditions as well, as to how heavy that is and how easy it is to run on.
Mm. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's got quite a lot of distinctive features. The clubhouse now has a 36-foot or 11 metres, again, for the metric lovers out there.
There you go.
Mural depicting all jockeys to have won the Kentucky Derby. It also has another mural depicting all of the trainers. Updates are done yearly to accommodate, obviously, new winners and trainers, jockeys, etc. But the most famous feature of it is the stadium is probably, or the racecourse rather, is the famous Twin Spire Grandstand, which was built back in 1895.
Very nice.
Yeah, it is very cool. 20 years after the course opened. But obviously, modernity, is that the right word? I don't know.
I think you can think of other words for it, but we'll call it modernity.
Always gets in the way. They obviously just built a shitload of modern luxury suites in 2008, which effectively block the view of...
Yay for capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Block the view of the famous spires from most parts of the ground, but obviously you can still... It's still like the feature front of the stadium. I think it's near the main entranceway, etc., etc. Yeah, and that's despite the fact that Churchill Downs has been designated a National Historic Landmark since 1986 in America.
Which I think tells you a lot about America in many ways, about their priorities.
Well, definitely, but I also, I love these tangents, and I looked up what a National Historic Landmark is in America.
Of course you did. Naturally.
Yeah. It's a building, district, object, site, or structure that is officially recognised by the United States government for its outstanding historical significance. They are abbreviated, as you might imagine, to NHLs, and they are designated by the United States Secretary of the Interior because they are sites where events of national historical significance have occurred, places where prominent persons lived or worked, icons of ideals that shaped the nation, outstanding examples of design and construction, places characterizing a way of life, or archaeological sites able to yield information.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely not that.
No, I'm actually I guess it's probably an outstanding example of design or construction, or a site where events of national historical significance occurred.
Yeah, places characterizing a way of life, maybe.
Yeah.
Would add a stretch.
But it's like, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, other examples of NHLs are the New York Stock Exchange, Brooklyn Bridge, Empire State Building. So yeah,
Grand Central Station.
Yeah.
And other places, presumably outside of New York City.
Yeah. They're all over the place, but I think New York's got a high density of them.
I imagine so, yeah.
Washington, D.C. probably will as well.
Probably, yeah. Plenty there.
But yeah, it's a big deal. So obviously, it also gives you a little, insight into, like you said, about America being a relatively new country. But yeah, whatever. The Crucible is a graded building here, so we can't really.
No, I think everything we've listed so far is prettier than the Crucible. To be fair, but
yeah,
it's all about the history.
Exactly. So I mean, we should probably shut our mouths. Yeah, notable events in the stadium's history, though. I think this is a pretty cool story, actually, given the period of time in which it happened. On the June the 5th, 1907, African-American jockey James Lee set a record that has never been beaten, and he won the entire 6-race card at Churchill Downs, which is fun.
Yeah, as you say, very impressive at any time in American history, especially impressive in 1907.
Yeah.
Where it was not easy to be an African-American man anywhere in the United States, let alone in Kentucky. Yeah.
But in more recent history, the stadium got hit by a tornado, which is pretty weird.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I say the stadium got hit by, I think it was the stables, which is obviously, important given that's where all the horses live. But they had to move 200 horses. They had to evacuate them, relocate them elsewhere. But the tornado didn't cause any damage to the Twin Spires or the clubhouse, so, we carry on. Yeah, exactly. No problem.
I mean, yes, not uncommon that part of the world. So
yeah, well, that's all the key features of the Derby. But I mean, we love a story.
We do love a story, and I do actually have some stories. I don't know how many of these we'll be able to fit in, but I think we'll try and fit a few stories in. I've got some good stories.
Yeah, go for it. We've got time.
We got time. We've always got time. So I'll go back in time. I think I'll start with the most recent one and work my way backwards in time with these. So we'll start in 2008. So this is a 30 years this will be after the last horse to win the Triple Crown. So as we mentioned, there was 37 years in between Triple Crown winners, which might be a bit of a spoiler for how this story ends. But this is a horse called Big Brown, and in 2008 Kentucky Derby, he roared past the leaders at the turn and pulled away with ease to win by nearly 5 lengths, which obviously got the attention of the nation.
Great name as well, by the way. Big Brown.
It was. We're talking about tragedy that happens. That was a derby that was marred by tragedy. Second place finished at 8 bells, collapsed after the finish, and was unfortunately euthanized on track. So it cast a shadow of the day. And just to point out, this is dangerous. While there aren't any fences, it's still a dangerous race. But the Preakness was next, and at Pimlico. At Pimlico, Big Brown was 1-5. He was the favourite. He was expected to win. He had to win, and he did win in breathtaking style. Sat just off the leaders and then unleashed his signature move. Jaw-dropping burst that left the field gasping behind him. The dream was alive. One race left. The Belmont Stakes, the race of champions. His chance to end 30 years of hurt. And with, obviously, as you can imagine, the eyes of a nation upon him. But then the cracks began to show, unfortunately, quite literally in this case, when a 3-inch quarter crack reappeared on Big Brown's hoof. Same kind of injury that sidelined him before. His trainer Rick Dutrow described it as a little hiccup, and the hoof was stitched, patched, and bandaged, stainless steel wire and fiberglass implanted, and he was expected to still run, but he missed critical days training. He fought through the heat. He fought the deep, tiring track of Belmont, and he ran. He broke cleanly through, but his jockey, a man called Desormeaux, fought for control, pulling rank and pulling hard against the bit. Going into the first turn, he bumped another horse, not once but twice. And down the backstretch, he seemed unsettled, sweating more than usual. His ears were pinned back. And then, shockingly, around the far turn, his jockey pulled him up. He had nothing left. He was eased. He was pulled up. I don't know whether the jockey had in mind the horse had lost his life earlier, but regardless, it was the right thing to do. It was a controversial thing to do. A veteran horseman named Billy Turner, who trained Seattle Slew, said bluntly, if Desormeaux had pulled up a horse like that in my day, the stewards would have run him out of state. And Steve Haskins said, no one will ever know for sure why a horse that personified perfection suddenly came apart at the seams. So, Big Brown, at that point, undefeated champion, had fallen. So that was the closest anyone had got in 30 years to winning them all, and heartbreak, just to tell you what the race can do from a sporting sense.
Yeah.
So that's my first story.
That's like I like it. I like the story. I also like the jockey because
it was the right decision.
He put the horse's welfare above everything else, and that's the most important thing. I mean, I was actually thinking as you were telling it, like, should he even be running in the third race? But I guess the Triple Crown is so coveted and so rare. It would be a brave man to just not enter when you've won 2 in a row. But that's the pressure of money and prestige, isn't it?
Yeah, you can repair a hoof like they did. Obviously, the desire for him to run was there. It probably would have caused the bookies to have to refund a lot if it was a late decision to pull him out. Nevertheless, the right decision was made in the end, and just missed out. But still a cool story. Won the Derby.
Yeah,
won the Preakness.
Won the Preakness. Legend. Exactly, and many horses are.
There's been a lot of horses, I think somewhere in the 20s who've won 2 out of the 3 events, but haven't been able to bring it home. And it is often the Belmont that is the undoer of horses. It is a bit longer than the other 2. It's a slightly different challenge, but this was one of those cases.
Yeah. That's a good story, though. I like that. Good name as well.
Yeah.
Big
Brown.
Got any others?
Named after, I think he was named after a US Postal Service parcel. I think they have a standard parcel called a Big Brown. I might be wrong on that, but I'm sure I read that somewhere.
A good reason to name him.
Yeah. I've got other stories. So we're getting onto conspiracy theory side of things now, and a little bit of gambling math.
This is fun. Let's go. Let's hear it.
A bit of So this is the 1994 Kentucky Derby and the story of Holy Bull. So Holy Bull wasn't just good heading into the Derby; he was an absolute phenomenon. As a 3-year-old, he'd won 8 out of his 10 starts that year, 5 of them at Grade 1 level. He had raw numbers which were off the charts, and he had out-jeweled some very good horses to win the Hutchinson Stakes early in the year, Florida Derby, blew away the field by 6 lengths with the fastest time since Alidar in 1978, Alidar being a Triple Crown winner.
Whoa.
So going into the last Triple Crown winner before this 37-year stretch, and going into the Kentucky Derby, Holy Bull wasn't just the favourite. He looked like a sure thing for the Triple Crown, let alone just the Derby. But then, disaster. So the Derby track was sloppy that day, but even account for that, Holy Bull's performance was inexplicable. He broke poorly, he ran listlessly, and he staggered home 12th in the end. His trainer, Jimmy Kroll, was adamant something was wrong. He believed Holy Bull had been drugged before the race. The horse, Kroll said, was unusually lethargic even before entering the gate, and afterwards Holy Bull was treated with antibiotics for possible infection, but no clear cause was ever found, and crucially no blood samples were taken immediately after the Derby, meaning if something had been done to him, there's no way to prove it, hence conspiracy theories.
Sabotage.
So rumours quickly spread that if Holy Bull had been sabotaged, it wasn't just about revenge or sabotage or trying to give another horse the best chance of winning. They did some maths and worked out that it artificially created what is known as a Dutch book. So a Dutch book in gambling, in simple terms, is a situation where the odds are so badly set that you could place bets on every outcome and guarantee a profit. So it would be like if you've got, let's say there's a two-horse race and both horses are rated 3-1. You bet on both of them, you will make a profit in that situation. So that's obviously not something the bookmaker's ever going to do, and they work hard to make sure this doesn't happen. However, if you end up with a horse who is such a favourite over any other horse, and then you take him out the race, essentially, the other horse's long odds would allow you to bet on multiple other horses and still give yourself a good chance of making a profit, if that makes sense. You take out the horse with the odds on, with odds on, and then you're left with horses with long odds. You could bet on several of them and guarantee yourself, or close to guarantee yourself, a good outcome. So that's what they reckoned. Well, that was what the rumours happened. The overwhelming favourite was going to run badly, not because of the conditions, not because of random chance, but just make sure of it, and you could turn the whole betting market upside down as a result. Public would keep pouring money into Holy Bull, keeping the odds inflated for everyone else. Meanwhile, you could quickly spread your bets across all the other horses, exploit the inside information that you had created, and take advantage of the bad odds of the other horses. Drug the favourite, keep it quiet, bet the field, and cash in. Completely illegal. Nearly impossible to prove after the fact, especially if a blood test isn't taken. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker, I should say. Holy Bull didn't just fade away after the Derby. He roared back in the Metropolitan Handicap, beating older champions by over 5 lengths. He crushed the Dwyer Stakes. He conquered the Haskell, outclassed the field in the Travers, and finished the season by dominating the Woodward Stakes. At the end of 1994, Holy Bull was named Horse of the Year, receiving 241 out of 245 votes, with mind-blowing average speed figures. He wasn't just good, he was historic, other than the fact he didn't bring it home in the Derby. Looking back on that, it makes the Derby stand out even more sharply.
Yeah, that's
a one-off single race, the biggest race of the season, sandwiched between so much success and creating such a beneficial situation for bettors, potentially, or for the betting markets.
Remind me, when did you say this happened again?
This was 1994.
94. Oh, I was wondering if it was in the sweet spot of the American Mafia, because that has got, that stinks basically.
It's very smelly, that one, isn't it? Now, we love a conspiracy theory, and I'm not saying for 1 second there's any actual evidence backing this up. But you look at the facts, and you look at the setup, and you look at the scenario. I can see a scenario where this would be very beneficial for certain people.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it a good conspiracy theory.
I mean...
And a good thing to discuss, even if there is, of course, absolutely no proof to back it up.
You can draw a pretty strong inference there, I think, that maybe the horse didn't have a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, as I think the one line in that which potentially would be a logical explanation is they said he was treated with antibiotics, potentially for an infection afterwards. So, but then again, maybe it was symptoms showing up strangely. Wouldn't want to speculate.
No. Yeah, well, let's just leave it to others to determine whether they think that it's an awfully conveniently timed infection.
Dear viewers, we will leave it to you. Dear viewers, we will leave it for you to make your own conclusions here.
Yeah, it's funny as well because you mentioned Aladar in there in that story. So
Aladar,
yeah, I had a which
is a great name as well.
It is a great name. I have a you just remind me of a little statistic I'd come across. He is the only horse to have finished second in all 3 races.
Really?
Yeah, he was defeated each time by Affirmed in 1978.
Oh, was that? Oh, of course, no. Sorry, it's Alidor and Affirmed. I was wrong when I said he won the Triple Crown. I have made a silly error. It was Affirmed. That was an incredible series of races. Yeah.
And so, So Alidor was he came second in all three, which is insane, to Affirmed, and his combined losing margin over all three races was 2 lengths.
Yeah.
So
and most of that was the Kentucky Derby. Like 1.5 lengths of that was Kentucky Derby. I'm ashamed of myself for getting Affirmed and Alidor mixed up. Yes,
that's
going to
right.
punish myself for that.
Self-flagellation.
Yeah, literally.
No, it hasn't ruined the story though, mate. The story was all about whether or not they would.
It still makes it still makes the fact that this horse outran him statistically impressive, because Alidor was clearly a Triple Crown winning worthy horse.
Yeah.
Even if he didn't win any of them, incredibly.
Yeah, which is really cool.
I could have done a story on that alone. Anyway, I've got more stories if you want them.
Oh, mate, more the merrier. You know, I'm partial to a historical story, so fire off.
We've had heartbreak. We've had conspiracy theory. Are we ready for some? Well, technically more conspiracy theories, but around a time that America was, let's just say, one of the most interesting years and eventful years in American history is 1968. So 1968 was a year of assassinations, riots, protests, upheaval. There's a country teetering on the edge, cities burning, people bitterly divided. The Vietnam War was raging abroad, taking thousands of young American lives each month. At home, the civil rights movement was at its boiling point, struggling not only for equality, but for survival against growing backlash. Trust in political leaders was crumbling on every side. Hope itself seemed a fragile thing. Kentucky and Louisville in particular felt these tremors keenly. The Louisville itself had a relatively progressive streak compared to other southern cities. It was still deeply tied to the traditions of the Old South. Segregation, though technically outlawed, lingered in practice. 1968, racial tension simmered under the surface of Kentucky society, flaring into the open whenever the national spotlight turned towards race relations. The memory of Louisville's own racial protests and school integration battles was still very fresh in people's minds. People were nervous, defensive, and fiercely protective of the cultural institutions that represented the old ways, none more so than the Kentucky Derby, the crown jewel of the state identity. And then a month before the Derby, America suffered one of the most profound tragedies in its existence, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, on April the 4th. His death sending shockwaves throughout the country, understandably throughout the world. Grief turned to rage. More than 100 American cities erupted into riots. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore among the hardest hit. Louisville, too, saw streets filled with protesters, cries for justice, sometimes meeting tear gas and police batons. Downtown businesses boarded up their windows. Tensions between black and white citizens ran dangerously high, and the scars of April bled through into the atmosphere of early May and the Derby.
Mate, you've set this up, so I want to know what the fuck happened at this race. That is some context. So, what the fuck happened at this Derby?
So, a man named Peter Fuller was a owner of a horse named Dancer's Image. Dancer's Image arrived at Churchill Downs among the favourites. Peter Fuller had publicly donated the horse's winnings from a recent race to Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King. And that meant a gesture of support for the civil rights movement and to support obviously a grieving widow. But in Kentucky, where many viewed the civil rights cause with suspicion or outright hostility, as mentioned, Fuller's politics was seen as potentially an insult, a challenge to the traditions that the Derby and its elite circles proudly upheld. Fuller's gesture, however noble, had already made him an outsider at Churchill's Down before the starting bell even rang. The race itself should have been a fairy tale for Fuller. Dancer's Image broke poorly out the gate, falling dead last almost immediately, but showing remarkable resilience. The grey colt fought back through the field. The crowd roared as he surged past the favourite forward pass at the 8th pole and drove home to a stunning come-from-behind victory, only the 5th time in the Derby history that a horse had gone from last to first. In any other year, the performance would have been immortalised in gold. Instead, the victory was almost immediately clouded in suspicion. Within days, officials announced that Dancer's Image, for the first time this had ever happened to a Derby winner, had failed his post-race urinalysis, testing positive for phenylbutazone, a common anti-inflammatory drug that was banned at the time in Kentucky racing, or was banned during meets. It was okay in between meets, I believe. Churchill Downs officials swiftly disqualified Dancer's Image, stripped Fuller of his trophy, and awarded the win to Forward Pass. Fuller protested furiously, insisting that the drug could not have been in Dancer's Image's system unless someone had tampered with the horse or the sample after the race. Many believed him, or at least believed that his political statements made him a target in a year when America's anger could boil over into any aspect of public life, even horse racing. The idea of sabotage, once unthinkable, seemed chillingly plausible in a world where assassinations, bombings, and betrayals filled the headlines. Fuller's legal battle, which cost him $250,000 to overturn the disqualification, dragged on for years, but was eventually unsuccessful. The decision stood and the dream was dead. For more than 50 years, Dancer's Image remained the only Kentucky Derby winner disqualified after the race, and still remains the only to be done so for drug-related reasons. 2019, Maximum Security crossed the line first, but was disqualified within minutes for interference, handing the win to Country House. Though the circumstances were dramatically different, it drew people's minds back to the last time another horse was disqualified. Obviously, 50 years after the event, 51 years. Nevertheless, again, another one. Make your own mind up about that.
That stinks of absolute shit. Like that feels like it's
smelly.
It's too convenient. Like
the timing. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like I don't know. Come from I don't know. That yeah. In the context which you so eloquently described as well, that's rancid. Like I would be inclined to give our protagonist the benefit of the doubt there and lean heavily in favour of a conclusion that suggests that he's been royally fucked over. But yeah, that's a very good story. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Got any uplifting ones?
I have another story.
Yeah, but is it a nice one?
I have another story, Ben.
Yeah, okay. I would like.
Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. You should know that more than anyone.
Oh no. Okay, go on. One more. Let's hear it.
The final story.
I want a romantic one.
We're going. Well, there's. I mean, you could say there's romance in this. It involves a married couple.
Is it an underdog?
We're going back to the 1950s. Actually, to be honest, on a sporting sense, this is a very good story. We're going back to the 1950s here. Okay. So it was a time when horse racing, it was more than just a sport. It was the heartbeat of society, obviously. There was kings, there's moguls, all barons, blue bloods, all spending fortunes for a shot of glory beneath the twin spires of Churchill Downs. And no name was more envied than that of William Woodward Jr., who was heir to the Bel-Air stud dynasty. The Woodwards didn't just own racehorses. They bred them like Renaissance artists, shaping marble, crafting champions like Gallant Fox, previously mentioned, Omaha, and at this point in time, a new horse called Nashua. Nashua was bred for greatness. From the moment he hit the ground in 1952, everything about him spoke of destiny. Trained by the legendary Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, who had already shepherded 2 Triple Crown winners, and ridden by Eddie Arcaro, a master tactician, who was, I believe, the most successful jockey. I think the only jockey to ever ridden multiple Triple Crown winners.
Oh, can I jump in there quickly? Eddie Arcaro,
yeah, of course.
Now that you've mentioned him, he's obviously in the American Thoroughbred Horse Racing Hall of Fame. He has won more American Classic races than any other jockey in history, and is the only rider to have won the US Triple Crown twice. He's regarded as one of the greatest jockeys in American history. So yeah, sorry, Eddie Arcaro. There you go.
Yeah, very famous, very successful jockey. So this horse was obviously highly rated for the Kentucky Derby that year, but out of the dust and the heat of California came a horse called Swaps, who was nicknamed the California Comet, which is a great nickname. So Swaps was everything Nashua wasn't, where Nashua was polished, Scraps was raw. Nashua was a very, very well-bred horse, very well-chiselled horse, whereas Swaps came out of a bit more of a rough background. Well, I would say a rough background. It makes it sound like he grew up on the streets. But his owner, Rex Elworth, wasn't society stock. He was someone who built a career out of... He turned a patch of the desert into a racing empire, and had brought this horse Swaps to the table. So the two colts met head-to-head in the 1955 Kentucky Derby. But it wasn't Nashua who crossed the line first, it was Swaps, leading a lot of people on the East Coast stunned. Nashua would then regroup and would win the Preakness and win the Belmont as well. But the sting of Derby defeat and missing out on the Triple Crown gnawed at the Woodwards like acid. Was Swaps truly the better horse, or had fate intervened on that day in Louisville? There was only one way to settle it, Ben. A race.
Nice.
A one-on-one match race between the two horses. Horse against horse. No excuses and no second chances. August the 31st, 1955, at Washington Park Racetrack in Chicago. 35,000 people pressed shoulder to shoulder beneath the summer sun. Millions more leaning into their radios, hanging on to every word. East versus West. Aristocracy versus ambition. The American dream. Rags to riches. Maybe not quite that, but you've got to build a story, haven't you?
Yeah, I was going to say, no one's coming from rags in horse racing. But yeah, carry on.
The start was clean anyway. Nashua seized the early lead. Swaps tried to keep close, but Nashua was relentless. Arcaro later said, "I knew from the first turn he wasn't coming. We had him." In the end, Nashua pulled away with mechanical efficiency, crossing the wire 6.5 lengths in front. Victory belonged to Nashua and to the Woodwards. For a brief glittering moment, it seemed the Woodwards' place atop society was not just restored, but it was immortalised forever. Then came the night of October the 30th, 1955, Ben, where our story takes something of a sinister turn. At their mansion in Oyster Bay, Long Island, a palatial estate fit for kings, Billy and Anne Woodward returned from a society dinner. So Anne Woodward had come from a humble background. She was of Midwest stock. She was not from anything like an elite family, but she was a very, very beautiful woman. She'd moved to New York and found a place in society, and eventually found her husband, Billy, there. Billy's mother disapproved of their marriage, thinking they weren't of the same stock, as it were. Nevertheless, they were married. The marriage was a tumultuous one. There was rumours of affairs on both sides throughout the marriage. And on this night, October the 30th, 1955, shortly after midnight, a shot rang out. And Billy Woodward, the heir to the Belair dynasty, one of the biggest horse racing studs in America, was dead. And the shooter was his wife, Anne. Whoa. She would claim, and the Nassau County grand jury would agree, that she mistook him for a prowler. The whispers soon blossomed like poisonous flowers for society pages.
What's a prowler? Like a stalker?
A prowler, as in someone who'd come onto their property and therefore deserved to be shot.
In true American style.
Classic castle doctrine standards, yeah.
Yeah.
So whispers bloomed across society pages that Anne was a social climber from Kansas, whose marriage to Billy was cold and bitter, that Billy was preparing to divorce her, that divorce would cut Anne off from her wealth, the status, the life she built, and ultimately the shooting had been no accident at all. These were the rumours that circled around. The Woodward family themselves, of elite aristocracy by American standards, they circled their wagons. Billy's former mother, Elsie Woodward, who, as I mentioned, was very much against the marriage originally, wielded her influence like a broadsword, ensuring that while no charges were filed, that Anne's place in society was done with, preventing scandal from coming across her family, but ensuring that Anne would no longer be part of anything resembling society. So she became a pariah, shunned by the society that once embraced her. She fled to Europe, living a half-life relatively compared to her old life amongst villas and boulevards of the Riviera. She famously cultivated affairs with younger men, but she never remarried. And in 1975, Truman Capote, another darling of high society and a man who knew where all the bodies were buried, if you believe certain people, published a very thinly veiled story in Esquire magazine. Capote depicted a character named Anne Hopkins, very clearly based on Anne Woodward, as a cold-blooded murderer. The exposure was brutal, humiliating, and for Anne, apparently too much for her to bear, because on October the 10th, 1975, Anne Woodward was found dead in her Fifth Avenue apartment, the victim of a deliberate drug overdose. Her funeral was described as sparsely attended. Society had finally exacted its revenge upon her. Tragedy didn't end there for the family, unfortunately. Less than a year later, James Woodward, who was her son and a Vietnam veteran himself, haunted by addiction and grief, jumped to his death out of a hotel window overlooking Central Park. He was just 29 years old. And a few decades later, the final Woodward heir, William Woody Woodward III, followed the same dark path as his brother, leaping from a 14th-floor kitchen window in Manhattan in 1999, leaving behind a wife, a daughter, and unanswered questions that have haunted his family for generations, such as, did Anne Woodward really kill Billy in a tragic accident, or was it something darker, covered up to protect the family name, and resulting in Anne being shunned as a result? So journalist Susan Brody spent years investigating the case. She interviewed more than 1,000 sources, combed through decades of police records, and her conclusion was that Anne Woodward had likely killed Billy by mistake. At the time, there was warnings, reports of prowlers in the area, and there was in fact a man who later said that he was casing up the joint and may well have been on that night because he heard a gunshot and ran. So they may well have heard someone genuinely invading their property and may have reached for the shotgun and, as so often tragically happens in these circumstances, saw a shadow in a dark corner of the room, thought her husband was beside her, pulled the trigger, and before it was too late, tragedy had struck. So the myth was Anne meant to kill her husband to avoid disgrace, to avoid divorce, proved more durable than any mere fact. As Truman Capote himself once said, all literature is gossip, and in this case, gossip wrote a tragic chapter.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like the Pistorius defense to me, but
oh, we will do an episode on that at some point, won't we? My word.
Oh, I'm sure. But yeah,
I mean,
the answer to that question, the answer to that night for me, Jack, is more guns. If there had been more guns, then I think this whole tragedy could have been avoided.
That seems a completely logical conclusion to reach. Should we point out to anyone wondering otherwise that sarcasm might be at play here?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I couldn't be more anti-gun if I tried, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's. I mean, it's pretty wild how all of this stuff can just emerge from, a couple of horse races and just set the world on a particular path. That's quite an intense story, that one.
Yeah, it's good though, isn't it?
It is good. It is very good. Yeah, that's what you get though with these events. So they're so long lasting and they're so established that really fascinating stuff does emerge from them.
Honestly, as the book I mentioned before, this is the sort of subject matter that I took this from, which was Great Horse Racing Mysteries by John McAvoy. The audio version is very good, it's very well read. I would recommend it, but I'm scraping the surface, honestly. Not all of them are about the Triple Crown events, but it's an American book. Most of them are about the Triple Crown events, and honestly, the stories, the tragedies, the rumours, the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, well, I can imagine.
I mean, when money is involved, when the mob is involved, when shady figures are involved, when gambling is involved, and when there's a lot at stake, either bad things can happen, or if not, then if bad things do happen, where there is no clear cause, rumours will come of it very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
there's a lot of stories.
There'll be, and we'll almost certainly rehearse more of them as we come around to these events in the calendar year. We would love to tell every story in every episode, but it's just simply not possible because they are so rife. And as I learnt last week, a 2-hour episode takes a very long time to edit. Yeah, well, we're learning our lessons as we go, and apologies to anyone who was listening to last episode. I completely ballsed up my microphone, which is why it sounds a bit odd. So I sold Jack down the river there. But
in your defence, it was the first time we recorded in person, and when you record in person, you don't wear a headset, and so I can't get immediate feedback on how Ben sounds in that circumstance. So
never mind.
There you go. Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. I mean, we've done quite a lot here, but one thing we haven't done, we've continuously mentioned the Preakness and the Belmont, but we haven't really explained anything about them. So
I think we can quickly, just a quick overview, and then we'll
wrap it up.
We'll bid everyone and each other good day.
Yeah. Do you want to do the Preakness?
Yeah, so the Preakness, as I mentioned this, there's Pimlico Racecourse, which I might pronounce terribly the first time I said it, even though it's a word very associated with the United Kingdom. It's a Pimlico Racecourse in Baltimore, Maryland. The middle jewel of the Triple Crown and the run for the Black-Eyed Susans. The Black-Eyed Susan is the Maryland state flower, and the winner, like the Kentucky Derby, is adored with a blanket of flowers. In this instance, flowers which look like Black-Eyed Susans, but I do believe they're not actually Black-Eyed Susans.
They are not.
Black-Eyed Susans don't come into season until later in the year.
Yeah, they bloom 2 months after the race, I think. Yeah.
But nevertheless, adorned in flowers that look like Black-Eyed Susans, which I think is enough. So they also have an infield fest, a party, fancy hats, official cocktail called the Black-Eyed Susan, made with vodka, Saint-Germain liqueur, and pineapple, lime, and orange juices, which again sounds quite pleasant, to be fair.
That does.
I'd have one of them. I do love a cocktail. Nothing wrong with that. So they used to sing the third verse of Maryland, My Maryland, which is the official state song, you would be surprised to learn, of Maryland. Accompanied by a marching band, but the song celebrates the Confederacy and was discontinued in 2020 due to the racial connotations. Which, I can believe that.
Yeah.
The Black-Eyed Susan is, of course, a tradition, but no Black-Eyed Susan is ever used. They don't bloom until 2 months later, so similar flowers are used, and historically were dyed black as well, I believe.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And as soon as the Preakness winner has been declared official, a painter climbs a ladder to the top of a replica of the old clubhouse cupola. The colours of the victorious winner's silks are applied to the jockey and horse that are part of the weather vane atop the infield structure, which is a cool tradition.
I love that tradition. I think that's my favourite tradition that we've come across. Yeah.
That is really cool.
It's like, if anybody's familiar with Lords, there's a very famous, wind dial thing at the top of weather vane thing at the top of the pavilion there as well, and it doesn't get painted, but I just like the idea of it being painted.
I think that's cool. And presumably that lasts a year until the following year where it's replaced.
Exactly.
Where weather itself probably wears the paint away. So cool. And the original Woodlawn Vase trophy is kept at the Baltimore Museum of Art and brought to the race each year under guard for the winner's presentation. The winner does not keep it, receives a replica, and then the trophy goes back to the museum for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And it may surprise you to learn the Preakness Stakes record is held by Secretariat.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
there's the Preakness.
The Preakness, and so if you've managed to win the Derby and the Preakness, then you go to Belmont with an opportunity of winning the Triple Crown, as you may now have probably guessed. Usually held on the first or second Saturday in June, 5 weeks after the Kentucky Derby, 3 weeks after the Preakness. Run at Belmont Park in Elmont, New York. That was a course opened in 1905, but won't bore everyone with the particulars. But essentially, the Belmont's moved a few times. It's predominantly run at Belmont Park, and I think it's actually being renovated currently. So it will be held somewhere else this year, and was last year. I think it goes back to Belmont Park in 2026.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is for all intents and purposes held at Belmont Park, but it's moved around a lot. Race covers one lap of the Belmont Park championship track, and it's called that because nearly every major American champion in racing history has competed on the racetrack, which is kind of fun. I didn't know that. Before reading into this event.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's got a very large, wide, sweeping turn and long home stretch. It's basically considered one of the fairest racetracks in America. And the main dirt track is nicknamed the Big Sandy, which I think is
good name.
Yeah, it's a cool name. And despite the distance, the race tends to favour horses with tactical speed. Basically, relatively few winners close from far behind the early leaders. So you got to get out the gate, fast.
Yeah.
And like the other two races, it has got a lot of tradition.
Any flower-based traditions, by any chance?
Oh well, now that you mention it, Jack, it was originally known as Run for the Carnations. Continuing that flower theme for you. But when it became established as the third race, it became known for obvious reasons as the Test of the Champion.
Nice.
It's
a good name.
It is a good name, exactly, because you are the double champ going into the Belmont. But the winning horse is still draped with a blanket of white carnations, and those carnations, of which there are approximately 700,
are only approximately.
Yeah,
disappointing.
Come from Colombia, which that's quite
okay.
Yeah. And the New York Race Association has long used the Pennock Company, a wholesale florist based in Philadelphia, to import them. I don't really know why I look up this shit. It's not that...
I was going to say, you're throwing a bone to florists this week. Good stuff, mate.
Yeah.
Honestly, just keeping these, what was it, architects previously? What else have we had?
Yeah. Horticulturalists.
Yeah. I guess this is kind of a bone to them as well. Big fans of yours.
Well, we cater for everyone here on the Almanac. The winning owner ceremonially presented with winners silver winners trophy, which is designed by Tiffany and Company, which I thought was just another weird tangent.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're fairly famous. First presented in 1896. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? There's a long-standing trophy, which is made by Tiffany and Company, which is cool. They also have a song, although this is weird. Like the Belmont, I don't know. There's something. Maybe it's part of its charm that it like moves locations, it changes its song, it changed its nickname. There's a theme emerging, I guess. At least they're consistent. It's currently themed from New York by Frank Sinatra, but it's also changed loads. I think before American Pharoah won the Triple Crown in 2015, some claimed that changing the official Belmont song had cursed the Triple Crown, which is why no horse had won since affirmed in 78. But others also astutely...
That is famously what the gods look out for.
Exactly.
Any changes in music.
Exactly, and like others astutely noted that there hadn't been any Triple Crown winners between 1979 and 1996, even though the original Sidewalks song was still being played and sung. So that is frankly...
Don't let facts get in the way of a good story, man.
But yeah, it's gone back. At one point it was Empire State of New York or whatever that song is by Jay-Z and Alicia Keys.
Fair enough.
They were trying to appeal to a younger audience, I think, but they realised that people actually do quite like tradition. And so that's why they've gone back to the Sinatra song.
Yeah. Belmont doesn't seem quite as keen on traditions as the others. Maybe that's a tradition in itself.
I also like this about the Belmont. So there are drinks.
Yes.
Yeah, the official drink was changed in 1997 from the White Carnation.
Of course it was.
It was changed from the White Carnation to the Belmont Breeze. And the New York Times has reviewed both drinks very unfavourably, calling the Belmont Breeze a significant improvement over the nigh undrinkable White Carnation, despite the fact that it tastes like a refined trash can punch.
Excellent.
That is damning. And then, 2011, the Belmont Breeze again was changed to the current official
Probably
drink.
for the best. I'll probably let them have that one.
Yeah, known as the Belmont Jewel, and I haven't read any reviews about the Belmont Jewel, so I can't.
Let's live in ignorance on that one. Let's assume it's nice.
Yeah. And then, no prizes for guessing who holds the course record. Secretariat. But also this again, just because I love this horse. His time of 2:24 in 73 set a world record that still stands for that length over 1.5 miles, which is in and of itself insane. But he won the race by 31 lengths.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously Triple Crown. I think it'd been a few years at least before 73 without a Triple Crown winner. obviously a lot of hype with Secretariat for obvious reasons. Going into that last race, what do you want? You want a nice tight finish, a nice, keep them on the edge of their seats. 31 lengths he won by.
Yeah.
Everyone else might as well have not turned up.
It's mad. So when he won the Triple Crown, he set a course record at all 3 courses. He ran negative splits in the Derby, and then he won by 31 lengths at the Belmont. Like, sorry, we're not even having a GOAT discussion. It's
him.
Yeah, it's just like, whatever. Like, anyone who says anything differently is an idiot and just haven't even looked at the basic statistics. But yeah, that's I mean, that's basically the Belmont. There have been other famous winners of it. Man of War is probably the one that people might have heard of in 1920. He won by 20 lengths, which is a pretty astonishing victory. He also won the Preakness, but didn't win the Derby. He wasn't entered because I think the calendar year, as we discussed at the beginning of the episode, was different, and the trainer didn't like racing in Kentucky. So
well, there wasn't really the hype around it in 1920.
Yeah,
1930 onwards. So maybe it just wasn't such a prestigious thing at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Shame.
I should have also mentioned, and it would be remiss not to mention. So he said American Pharaoh won. In 2000 and when did he win again? 15. He's the only horse to have won the Grand Slam. He's the first and only horse to sweep the 4 majors, which is obviously the Triple Crown. And he also won at the Breeders' Cup, I think. I think it's the Breeders' Cup that makes the Grand Slam. So we can probably verify that before we.
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think you are right.
But that's absolutely absurd.
That is impressive. So maybe put him second in the GOAT argument.
Yeah, he's second. You can't compete with Secretariat's winning margins and dominance. So
the Breeders' Cup's only been going on 41 years. So a lot of the fact there's no Triple Crown winners will be because of that, and there's also not been any Triple Crown winners in most of those 41 years as well, because that was the early 80s. It will have started. So we'll. Pinch of salt on that one. It's a much newer. So 1982 was the first Breeders' Cup. So a much newer thing, this Grand Slam, as we're talking about. But nevertheless, the first winner, perhaps we should refer to, was American Pharaoh, rather than saying no one's ever won it before, because obviously Secretariat never got the chance to.
Yeah, he didn't exactly, and would have. Can we be clear? Would have.
I think I'd bet on him. Put it that way. I'm not that bad at betting.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, before we wrap this up, I just think it's such a cool event. Can I close us with a nice little sentiment, which I think sums up like the romance
I think in a second, but before we do that, should we talk about where you can watch it? Because I like to. It seems very unromantic to do that after some nice closing words. Let's do the fundamentals first. So you can watch it if you're in the USA on NBC, all 3 races. Mm-hmm. The Belmont, for some reason, is also on Fox. In the UK, Sky Sports for the Kentucky Derby, Ireland, Virgin Media 2, and Canada, TSN.
Yeah. I don't know if...
I'm sure you can catch it on YouTube very soon afterwards as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if the Preakness and the Belmont are shown...
I doubt they are. Maybe. I'm sure there's somewhere you can find them, but we'll talk about that maybe in a couple of weeks' time before the Preakness.
Yeah.
See if we can slip it in, but yeah, don't know.
Cool. Well, before we go then, now that we've covered everything we want to cover, there's just like a really nice story, which I think we were saying about the rarity of the winners. Bill Hartek, who won the Derby 5 times and the Preakness Stakes 3 times and the Belmont Stakes once, but never won the Triple Crown, had a shot at the Triple Crown on a horse called Northern Dancer, who was a Canadian horse. In 1960,
good name then.
Yeah, it's a really cool name. In 1964, he had a shot at the Triple Crown on Northern Dancer. Northern Dancer obviously had won the Derby and the Preakness, and going into the Belmont was really there was a lot of hype, as you imagine, because there was a gap. I think it was like 26-year gap, and unfortunately he came up short. He didn't win the Belmont. And because there had been such a gap, I think people were disappointed, like the hype train, this, that, and the other. And Bill Hartek being, as successful as he was as well, I think people wanted him to win the Triple Crown, and it's all this, that, and the other. So there was a lot of disappointment when Northern Dancer didn't win. And he was asked immediately after the race, like, if he was disappointed in the horse, which I think is a shit question.
I agree.
And to Bill's credit, he responded, and I think this is just perfect, really. He just responded, "How can it be disappointment when a horse runs his heart out for you? He certainly didn't disgrace himself. Not to me, anyway." And it seems Canada agrees, because Northern Dancer was inducted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame in 1965 and is considered a Canadian icon, which I think is adorable.
There's a shiver down my spine.
Yeah, because
Thank you, Ben.
He's a horse.
Good way to end.
He's a horse, and he's in their Hall of Fame, so it's a lovely way to end, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, it was Citation 1948 was the previous winner of the Triple Crown, and of course the next one a few years later, 1973.
Oh boy,
Secretariat. We'll end on a mention of him one more time. Yeah, so I think that's it. I think next week we are moving over to do some, sticking with the Canadian theme.
Yeah.
Throwing a bone to Canada. I say throwing a bone. It's not something we're experts on, but we'll do our best. It's the Ice Hockey World Championships and the NHL playoffs to start as well. So we're going to do both. We're going to talk about ice hockey and dive into that. And it's probably a good, as I said in the first episode of this, a good chance for me to educate myself a bit more on certain sports. And I think this is one of them. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, same. I know nothing about ice hockey, but I know it's brutal and I know it's fun.
Yes. I saw an ice hockey game actually last year. I saw a pre-season game when I was in Las Vegas between the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights, and it was fun.
Cool.
Enjoyed it.
So if you want to learn more about ice hockey, please feel free to join us then. But I guess until then, have a great time at the London Marathon, Jack. And
I will. And I'll see you soon.
See you soon, pal.
Once again, thank you for listening to the Sporting Almanac podcast. It is always appreciated. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, a subscribe, or a rating at wherever you get your podcast from. More importantly, please tell your friends. There will never be any better advertising than word of mouth. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac or drop us an email at thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. Congratulations to everyone who ran the London Marathon this weekend. You're all heroes. We'll be back next week with some ice hockey, and until then, stay curious. Sport is nothing without the stories that make it. Goodbye.